July 28th, left Winnipeg at 1:20 and came down again through that wonderful weed ocean. By gracious, it is bewitching. There's the peace of the ocean about it and a deep contentment, a heaven-wide sense of ampleness, spaciousness, where pettiness and all small thoughts and tempers must be out of place, not suited to it, and so not intruding. The scattering, far-off homesteads with trees about them were so homelike and remote from the warring world, so reposeful and enticing. Well, the Clemens party took rooms at the Crookston Hotel. From J.B. Pond's diary, we have been in Crookston, Minnesota, all day, where we were the first and especially favored guests of this fine new hotel. Mark Twain's name was the first on the register. We are enjoying it. Mark is as gay as a lark, but he remained in bed until time to go to the Opera House. This city is wonderfully improved since I was here in 1883 with Mr. Beecher, in 1885 with Clara Louise Kellogg, and in 1887 with Charles Dickens, Jr. The opening of this hotel is a great event. People are filling up the town from all directions to see and hear Mark, and taking advantage of the occasion to see the first new hotel, the Crookston, in their city, with hot and cold water, electric lights, and all modern improvements. Special trains were run for this performance, and some of the sleeping cars were left on the sidings to save passengers the cost of a hotel. Crookston was a small town of 3,992 persons. A horse and wagon picked up the garbage. Twice a week, a team pulling a wooden tank of water on wheels flushed down the unpaved streets. The volunteer fire department kept their ladders chained and padlocked to a large tree in front of the Merchants National Bank, so that the firemen would not have to hunt up the house painter during a fire call. Tuesday, July 30th, another travel day. From J.B. Pond's diary, we left Crookston at 5:40 a.m. We were up at 4:30. Everybody was cheerful. There was no grumbling. This is our first unseasonable hour for getting up, but it has done us all good. Even Clara enjoyed the unique experience. It revived her memory. She recollected that she had telegraphed to Elmira to have her winter cloak expressed to Crookston. Fortunately, the agent was sleeping in the express office near the station. We disturbed his slumbers to find the great cloak, which was another acquisition to our 16 pieces of hand luggage. Grand Forks, at the fork of the Red River and the Red Lake River. This was an important trading point for the French and Indian trappers. Our train was 45 minutes late. Mark complained and grumbled. He persisted that I had contracted with him to travel and not to wait about railway stations at 5 o'clock in the mornings for late trains that never arrived. He insisted on traveling. So he got aboard the baggage truck, and I traveled him up and down the platform while Clara made a snapshot as evidence that I was keeping to the letter of my contract. Larimore, a railroad town built in 1881 and named for a local farmer. When we boarded the train, we found 5 lower berths, which means 5 sections, ready for us. There was a splendid dining car with meals a la carte and excellent cooking. All the afternoon there were the level prairies of North Dakota wheat, just turning, the whole country a lovely green. Mapes, at one time a thriving little town with a school, creamery, cheese manufacturing, hotels, dry goods store, elevator, bar, town hall, livery, garage and repair shop, restaurant, and churches. Devil's Lake, originally Sioux territory, or Lakota, if you wish. They were all relocated to the Spirit Lake Reservation. The Sioux called the lake Minnewakan Kante. The whites thought this meant Bad Spirit Lake or Devil's Lake. Actually, the water was undrinkable because of salinity. There's no devil in Sioux religion. Rugby Junction, promoted as the geographic center of North America. Minot was created when the Great Northern Railway ceased construction for the winter of 1886. When trains arrived, the conductor would announce, "Minot, this is Minot, North Dakota. Prepare to meet your doom." The Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Sault Ste. Marie, or Soo Line, reached Minot in 1893. The town is named after Henry D. Minot, a railroad investor and ornithologist. The Great Northern Railway, creation of the tycoon James J. Hill, was the northernmost transcontinental railway in the United States. It was the only privately funded transcontinental railway ever built. No federal grants were used. The Great Northern was built in stages, creating profitable lines before extending it further. The main line began in St. Paul, Minnesota, crossed the Mississippi to Minneapolis on the Stone Arch Bridge near St. Anthony Falls, the only waterfall on the Mississippi River. Then out across North Dakota and Montana. Then came the arid plains, the prairie dog towns, cactus, buffalo grass, jackrabbits, wildlife, and the Missouri River. Dear old friend that had borne both of us on her muddy bosom many a time. It was a great day for both Mark and me. The ladies were enthusiastic in proportion, as they saw that Mark and I were boys again, traveling upon our native heath. In northern Dakota, no more wheat, but grass and billowy rolling, just the Great Plains. Struck the Missouri at Williston, and followed it several hours to Fort Buford, a large post. 7 p.m. on the border of Montana. Fort Buford at the confluence of the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers. This is the site of Sitting Bull's surrender in 1881. 3 civilian woodcutters were killed at the mouth of the Yellowstone in December of 1866. Lieutenant Hiram H. Ketchum, with 60 men, reacted, drove off the Indians, and recovered the bodies, with slight loss to his detachment. According to the regimental history, the Lakota boasted that they intended to annihilate the soldiers, and during the winter they besieged the post. The siege cut off the garrison from the nearby Missouri River and forced them to sink shallow wells near their quarters in order to obtain fresh water. The shallow well water they drank was contaminated by the post's livestock and or human waste and caused dysentery. From December 21st to the 24th, a large group of the Hunkpapas repeatedly attacked and captured the post's ice house and sawmill located near the river and opened fire on the post. The attackers were not repelled until Rankin ordered his 2 12-pound Napoleons to return fire. Captain Rankin's wife spent the winter in camp, enduring hardships and dangers, with the troops in garrison. The harassing raids and resulting lack of communication from the isolated post led to the perpetration of a hoax, the Fort Buford Massacre, purporting that the fort had been wiped out, Captain Rankin captured and tortured to death, and Rankin's wife captured and abused. The episode began when the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a story on April 1st, 1867, based on a letter allegedly written from the fort, which was then picked up and run the next day nationwide. It was given legs by a letter published April 6th in the Army and Navy Journal, attributed to the wife of a prominent Army officer, confirming the massacre. Although by April 4th, many newspapers had begun to question the validity of the report. The Chicago Daily Times, Detroit Free Press, New York Daily Tribune, New York Times, and Boston Herald, among others, continued to feed the rumors with further stories for another month, many of them accusing the Army and the Johnson administration of covering up the massacre. The hoax was eventually exposed by Rankin himself in correspondence to the War Department. The fort was subject to attack by Sitting Bull's forces until the early 70s, and by 1872 the fort had been enlarged to such an extent that a perimeter stockade was no longer needed, and most of the fighting had moved westward into the Montana Territory. The fort was decommissioned in 1895. Dakota, Lakota, and Dakota peoples inhabited the Glasgow region until 1888. In 1887, they'd signed a treaty surrendering 17,500,000 acres. They were relocated to the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and all tribes removed from the Glasgow area. At one time, this area supported huge herds of buffalo and other games, as reported by the Lewis and Clark expedition. The last Native American buffalo hunt held here was 1885. The Dawes Act. In 1887, Congress passed the General Allotment Act. Indian lands were to be surveyed and each individual family given 80 to 160 acres. Unmarried adults, 40 to 80 acres. Well, the natives were forced from their homes, and their lands were parceled out. The plains which they had previously roamed were now filled with white settlers. The Indians had been cheated out of their lands, forced onto reservations, and suffered attempts to Americanize them. Most did not survive this relocation, assimilation, and military defeat. And by 1890, there were fewer than 250,000 Native Americans. If you'd please pardon an anachronistic bit, Kid Curry, part of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, robbed a train near Wagner and got away with $40,000. This was July 3rd, 1901, in about 6 years. Havre, Montana, originally known as Bullhook Bottoms. The Chu'gn buffalo jump is in Havre, over 2,000 years old. It is one of the best preserved buffalo jumps anywhere in the world. Nearby is the Bear's Paw battlefield where the Nez Perce were attacked and defeated by the U.S. cavalry. Chief Joseph surrendered with his famous statement, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." Fort Assinaboine. Following the Great Sioux War of 1876-77 and the defeat of U.S. Army forces led by General George Armstrong Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and the defeat and capture of the Nez Perce band of Chief Joseph by the U.S. Army in the Battle of Bear Paw. In 1877, General Phil Sheridan suggested that a fort be built on or near the Milk River to ward off possible attacks from the north by the Sioux, led by Chief Sitting Bull, who had migrated to the Cypress Hills in Canada, or by the Nez Perce, some of whom were also in Canada. Lieutenant Colonel J.R. Brooke recommended the site where the post was established. The fort is located in Hill County, 6 miles southwest of Havre, the county seat. It was named for the Siouan-speaking Assiniboine people. The Native Americans never attacked from Canada. Wednesday, July 31st, after a trip of some 700 miles from Crookston, Minnesota, the Clemens party arrived at Great Falls, Montana. From J.B. Pond, we arrived at the Park Hotel here at 7:30 a.m. After a good night's sleep, interest grows more and more intense as we come nearer to the Rocky Mountains. It brings back fond memories of other days. The two brothers Gibson, proprietors of the hotel, drove our party out to Giant Spring, 3 miles distant. It is a giant, too. I never saw a more beautiful and more wonderful spring. A big river fairly boils up out of the ground, the most beautiful, deep, peacock green color I ever saw in clear water. The largest copper ore smelters in the world are here. The Great Falls could supply power enough for all the machinery west of Chicago, with some to spare. Fort Benton, the last trading post on the upper Missouri River. For 30 years, this port attracted steamboats all the way from the Mississippi River. Its importance was superseded only upon the arrival of the railroad. In 1867, Union General Thomas Francis Meagher, then acting governor of Montana Territory, fell overboard from his steamboat and drowned. His body was never recovered. Mark is improving. For the first time since we started, he appeared about the hotel corridors and on the street. He and I walked about the outskirts of the town and caught a number of interesting snapshots among the Norwegian shanties. I got a good group, including 4 generations with 8 children, a calf and 5 cats. Mark wanted a photograph of each cat. He caught a pair of kittens in his arms, greatly to the discomfort of their owner, a little girl. He tried to make friends with the child and buy the kittens, but she began to cry and beg that her pets might be liberated. He soon captured her with a pretty story, and she finally consented to let them go. Few know Mark's great love for cats, as well as for every living creature. Mark had an off night and was not at his best, which has almost broken his heart, and he couldn't get over it all day. The Gibson brothers have done much to make our visit delightful, and it has proved very enjoyable indeed. Of course, being proprietors of the hotel, they lose nothing, for I find they charge us $5 a day each, and the extortions from porters, baggage men, and bellboys surpass anything I know of. The smallest money is 2 bits, 25 cents. Absurd.